Hey guys, so lately I've been doing these competitive tier lists by the data videos, and just like last time I thought I'd focus on categorizing just the rogue decks. Keep in mind that at the time of recording this video, the YCS did not conclude yet, so I won't be able to comment on that tournament's results as I talk about these decks. So I'm not going to go in detail on how the formula works to categorize the decks since that's already covered in depth in my previous videos, so I'll link those below for you to check out if you're interested. Just know that the formula considers how often the particular deck is played among the other 20 most played rogue decks in the last 7 days, their win percentages, and whether they were played by the top 25 ranked players on Dueling Book, which is based on my monthly meta-analysis videos, another topic that you can check out. Now in the overall competitive tier list that I posted a couple of weeks ago, this was the breakdown, so for this video we're basically excluding any decks that you see here on tier 1 or 2. Now I mentioned this last time, but YGeoScope does have some limitations in how they identify decks. For example, YGeoScope can't identify evil twins at this point for some reason, so that deck won't be part of the video. As for pure heroes, because so many decks play the DPE engine, and oftentimes these decks get mistakenly categorized as just hero when they're only playing just a few hero cards, that's why I can't rely on this data and cannot include pure heroes. And lastly, YGeoScope identifies Phantom Knight as Burning Abyss, and because presumably there's a lot more players running Phantom Knight than actual pure Burning Abyss, I'm not going to include this deck either because the data won't be accurate. There's of course other decks that YGeoScope can't identify properly, but they aren't relevant for this video as most of the rogue decks were actually identified by the site. So let's get started with the rogue tier list. In what I call the A tier of rogue, we are starting off with Dogmatica Invoke, which many would say is more so tier 2. Now keep in mind that when I did the overall competitive tier list video, that was before the release of the Albaz Strike structure decks. Now that Branded Fusion is legal, I think this deck will move back up to tier 2 for the next month. It's been known as a pretty consistent deck, but its typical win condition in Winda really lost its strength because it is outed easily by the Brave token engine, and against Flunder it really doesn't matter, but Branded Fusion will give it some more oomph, and I am pretty excited to play this deck myself lately. Next we have a huge drop off in the rogue tier score, but we have DDD. It had a brief moment of YCS hype, but couldn't replicate it again at YCS Charlotte, but who knows if that would change for YCS Bogota, which would have concluded by the time this video is posted. Big brain deck that can do really well when piloted by the right player as it has a lot of combo lines. The win percentage among all players at 54% still ain't bad considering that it requires a galaxy brain to play it. Then we have Virtual World, which has been falling off more and more lately compared to the start of the format. Despite being able to use the Brave token engine as well, that does make the deck brickier than it already is, but it certainly is a respectable deck that can still put up Crystal Wing and Kaliga as well as the Chooch Pop at least. After that we have Ad Ignister, a typical popular deck that you see on Dueling Book and even see some play among the top ranked players. Respectable 55% match win percentage in the last 7 days as well, and is yet another combo deck on this list that summons like crazy. Now let's move on to the second tier or tier B, which we start off with Salamangreat. Always a popular deck among players, although its 47% match win percentage wasn't so hot, but people are anticipating that Salamangreat Circle will come back to 3 on the next ban list, so that will help a teensy bit, at least if it does. After that we have Danos, which surprisingly had a really low match win percentage at 43%. It can be played as a beatdown going second strategy or a going first, scrap Dino build, a board kind of strategy, which honestly I think is still a respectable deck. It's strange to think that this deck was a tier 1 deck not that long ago. And then we have Infernoble Knight, which is rather popular among some top ranked players on DB. Another deck that was once tier 1 and still looking to hand loop you and setting up a decent board. Really cool artwork and archetype, just wish it wasn't so centered around ripping cards out of your hand. Next we have Plunder Patrol, which along with the Brave token engine can be rather sneaky good, as demonstrated by Distant Coder, who made it to day 2 at YCS Charlotte. Didn't have too good of a win percentage among all players though, but with the right captain piloting the deck, it can certainly surprise you. They do have a variety of different negations and probably has the advantage that most people won't know what all the cards do. And then we have Altergeist, always on rogue lists for a while now. It seems like it has fallen off since the last time I did the overall competitive tier list, and trap heavy decks aren't too predominant at the moment other than some Eldritch decks here and there. Rounding up the B tier is Earth Machines, which actually had a pretty good win percentage at 56%. Machina Mayhem was personally my very first structure deck that I ever bought, so this deck that features Machinas has a special place in my heart. I think mostly these decks have a more controlled playstyle with a lot of traps, and the deck can run skill drain. Next we have what I call the C tier, and we are starting this list off with Mystic Mines. Surprisingly, this has a really good win percentage at 63% this time around. Even though the last few times this deck got featured on my tier list, the deck wasn't doing so well. Probably a hit and miss kind of deck, and especially on Dueling Book, I'm sure a lot of players will just rage quit and move on to the next match, unlike in real life tournament, where you are going to have to try to play it out and hope that it doesn't suck all the joy out of you. And then we have a deck that hasn't been featured on my tier list videos yet, Subterra Guru Control. It was honestly quite the popular deck when Dragoon was first released, since they can still set Guru after using Red Ice Fusion, and then flip it face up with Hidden City, but it certainly has fallen off in play for the last little while. Used to be one of the most popular control decks, but I guess Eldritch sorta came in the way and took over that spot. Speaking of old control decks that used to be predominant, we then have True Draco, a deck that doesn't utilize the extra deck so it's very cheap to play, which is why this was my first ever competitive deck that I ever built. Really easy to learn to play, so for new players it technically is a good recommendation to start, but as a warning, it does play a lot of floodgates and focuses on not letting your opponents play, so you will get some hate thrown at you. After that, we have Dragon Maid, which is more of a control strategy unlike Dragon Link decks that uses just Dragon Maid Chamber, although they also seem to have moved away from that build. Their gimmick is that the monsters take out for their dragon versions during the battle phase, and honestly is a pretty good deck that you can't underestimate. Shoutouts to Milano too, of course, since this deck is his baby after Orcus. Next we have my personal favorite in Cyber Dragons, but my goodness, just look at that miserable 36% win percentage. A fan favorite deck of course, and also brings in a lot of casual players, so maybe that might explain the terrible performance. If Anaconda gets hit on the next ban list though, the deck will definitely take a major hit, but the new Therian cards coming out in Dimension Force in May will help the deck as well. Make sure to check my replay videos if you are interested in learning how to play Cyber Dragons. Then we have Mathmech, which a lot of times actually sees play from several players among the top ranked, but I guess at this time when I did my meta analysis for April, they weren't high ranked at the time. With the announcement of the new Mathmech card and Power of the Elements, I know this deck may have a lot of meta potential, so watch out for this in the near future. Speaking of players in high ranked, Pure 555 usually is ranked super high on DB every format with ABC, so with the right pilot, this deck can do some serious damage. Also another deck that can use the Brave token engine actually, and it's certainly nice that they get to catch a break since Konami TCG seems to really hate on this deck for no reason. And to cap off the tier C category is Madolche. The deck isn't played often as it once was, but still a strong strategy that can set up sort of a wall on their first turn, and then really hit you hard with an OTK the turn after. Their artwork is great too, and certainly a rogue favorite. Finally, to list a couple of decks in the D tier category, we have Numeron, which I assume is the more OTK version where you just play the field spell and start attacking with your Numeron bros. The deck actually has had a good amount of competitive success in remote events during the pandemic, primarily from Emmanuel Lilly, who has a YouTube channel actually called DD Gods, so check him out as well. And finally, the last deck among the top 20 most played rogue decks that made it onto this tier list is Thunder Dragons. Gone are the days of Colossus Lock paired with the Titan Pop, but hey, the deck is still alive considering that there is a lot of generic support to make this deck work. I think it's more of a combo oriented strategy now, whereas right after the Colossus ban, it was more of a grindy control strategy. Not sure if Colossus will ever come back soon, but it clearly needs it considering the pretty low win percentage at the moment. Alright guys, that was it for the rogue tier list by the data for this month. Hope you enjoyed that and hope it gave you some rogue options to consider if you were looking for a new deck to play. As always, thank you to my patrons for their support. You guys are certainly helping me stay motivated to continue making data videos. Take care guys.